Welcome back to the podcast. This is episode number 330, where I am going to be unpacking for you one of the most annoying, challenging, and difficult things that has ever happened in my business, which I'm going through right now. Now, when I was planning the podcast for July, you'll see I did an episode a week ago that was all about taking a month off. And normally I would release that at the end of July, like my kind of sign-off episode before I'm off for a month. And for some reason, I just thought, you know what, let's just do it a bit sooner in July. And then when we get to filming, I'll see what I want to talk about for the last couple of weeks in July. And I feel like past me maybe had some kind of gut sense that something was coming, because this episode was completely unplanned a week ago. And then when I came to know that I was doing this filming today, I thought, you know what? I think we should talk about what is going on and not just do an episode telling you what's going on and having a tiny violin moment or moaning or making you feel sorry for me, but turning it into a bit of a learning moment where I'm going to talk about today my strategy for a business crisis. Like when something goes wrong, whether that be something that I've done wrong, that someone else has done wrong, or whether it be something that is completely outside of my control, much like what has gone on recently, what I do in order to move forwards, create solutions, and also just cope. This is an approach that I have probably honed over the last 9 years without even realizing it. And it's been really interesting to me noticing the advice that I'm giving to myself and the way I'm kind of coaching myself through this challenge be pretty much what I share with my clients when things come up for them. You know, every business is different, every challenge is different, but I think there's a lot of similarities around kind of how to cope with it and help yourself to move forward. So I'm going to tell you what's gone wrong. Don't worry, I will share the info. But I'm also from that going to share, I think I've got 6 things here that I feel I've done over the last month in order to turn a crisis into action, into a solution, so that hopefully at some point in the future, this feels like a distant memory. So before we get to that, let me tell you what has happened. Now, some of you might know what's happened because you are one of the customers that it has happened to. But to cut right to the point, I realized at 10 p.m. The fact that it was at 10 p.m. definitely adds to the drama because your brain's not its best at 10 p.m. It's not the kind of time where you want to be realizing something very major has gone wrong. But at 10 p.m., probably about 3 weeks ago now, I realized that every single direct debit in my business had been cancelled. Not direct debits of me paying for things, but direct debits of over 130 customers and clients who owe my business money. All cut, all removed, nothing I could do to reverse that happening. Now, I'm not going to get into too much detail around why it's happened because A, I don't want to scare people. B, I'm really not interested in naming and shaming and casting blame. I don't really think that energy is helpful for me or really for anyone else. And C, because I still really don't understand how it's happened. There was some bounced payments in my bank account, which shouldn't have bounced because the money was in there. A certain software that I used decided that after just a couple of bounce payments, my account was to be shut down with no warning, with no contact, probably what was a very automatic thing on their end. So when my account was shut down, despite me not wanting the account to be shut down, all of these direct debits were cancelled. All of these payment plans that people had signed up to were just gone. In one foul swoop, over £26,000 of future revenue was taken from my business. God, that sounds so dramatic, doesn't it, when I say it like that? I kind of love it for me. I mean, I obviously don't love it for me. It's not a great situation to be in. But it truly is the worst financial issue I have ever had in my business. And I would probably go as far as to say it's one of the worst challenges I've faced overall. I think a lot of the challenges that I've faced previously have been very kind of people-oriented, like getting trolled by people or having, legal issues around the book to do with people. Like, that stuff's hard because of that emotional people element, but none of those things felt particularly challenging financially. They didn't feel particularly challenging in terms of admin. This has been like nothing to do with any person, but everything to do with software, admin, systems, processes, money, which is just not an area of business that I enjoy, and also is an area of business that has a very big knock-on effect on everything else. So that is what's happened. That money would have come in automatically. And then I realized in that moment it wasn't going to. I want to talk about what I've done over the last few weeks in order to move forwards with that problem, but also move forwards in other areas of my business despite that problem also happening. Because I think what's very easy when something goes wrong in business is for it to feel incredibly consuming and for it to kind of halt everything else. And whilst I would say to an extent you can't stop a problem from slightly taking over, I do believe that there are ways that we can learn to kind of coexist with said challenges. And this being such a big challenge, I've definitely had to utilize some of those strategies over the last few weeks. And I'm sharing this publicly as it's happening because I always want to normalize the challenges. I never want to pretend that there's not stuff going on behind the scenes in my business. I always want to show my highs so that you can see what makes running a business worth it. But I also always want to show the reality of that behind the scenes so you know what it takes and what goes on in order for those highs and that success to exist as well. I'm also sharing this in real time, which I don't really often do with my challenges because I want to show you how I'm responding. I don't just want to say like, oh, this thing's gone really wrong, proof that business is hard, like hopefully that makes you feel better about yourself. I want to take it a step further and go and come with me as I fix it. Let me show you how I'm coping with it and what moving through a challenge like this really looks like. As I said, it's a lot of the things that I say to my clients or to my friends if they're, have something going on in their business. And actually it's been quite a humbling experience going through something like this and really kind of relearning a lot of these strategies as well. So without further ado, the first thing that I would share, and I think this is so universal, anytime anything goes wrong in your business, the first thing to remember is that you are a human before you're a business owner. I'm going to be honest with you, I am really proud of how I've dealt with this. I have been very level-headed. I haven't really spiraled. I've had a very good mindset about this. However, I had to let myself be a human for just a short little while and feel what I was feeling before I clicked into that kind of business owner mindset. Whenever a client tells me that something is going wrong in their business, maybe a launch didn't go how they expected. Maybe something's going on for them legally. Maybe they've just got a certain challenge. I'll always say to them, look, first thing, if you haven't already, let yourself be human. Feel what you're feeling. For me, that was a good 5-10 minutes of feeling really frustrated, angry, disappointed, annoyed. I was so angry at this piece of software that had made this thing happen. I was so frustrated that I hadn't done something sooner to notice it or to fix it. I was stressed about finances. That actually isn't something I felt for a very long time in my business. I've built really good financial systems and diverse revenue so that I don't feel a lot of stress around money. And it was a really alien feeling for me to suddenly be like, oh my gosh, I feel really insecure financially. These direct debits, this money that my business brings in every month, that's money that I know is going to pay my salary. That's money that I know brings my business security. That future income allows me to feel comfortable and take risks. And suddenly that kind of rug was pulled out under me. And I felt those feelings. Like I said, it was 10 p.m. at night, so I remember just being sat in bed. And by the way, I realized this had happened because all these little clues had been popping up over the last few days. And then at 10 p.m., my brain just had this light bulb of like, I think all of these things are connected and this has happened. And I logged into my laptop and lo and behold, that had happened. And I had that, sinking feeling in my stomach. I had my heart rate rise. I felt that kind of, moment of just overwhelm with all of these emotions. And I let myself feel that. I've actually been quite reluctant to talk about this with many people because sometimes I think overly talking about a challenge encourages us to kind of spiral a bit, to like get a bit too obsessed with it, involved with it. And actually, I needed to let myself be human. And then I needed to think about, okay, what next? So that's the first thing I'd say. When you're in a crisis, when something's gone wrong, let yourself be a human. Don't expect yourself to immediately be that like level-headed business owner. Have a moment of being human and then go, right, now what are we going to do next? So for me, that was that first kind of 10 minutes. And I've had a few moments since where I felt very human and felt all of those emotions. But I think the next thing I would share, number 2, is what leads from that, which is the next thing that you want to do with any problem, big or small, is understand the situation fully. Uncertainty is a breeding ground for anxiety. And when you do not know what has actually happened and what the situation is and the impact of it and what's actually going to be going wrong, it just gives your brain space to kind of spiral and get overwhelmed and jump to conclusions. And so the next thing that I did was I really understood exactly what happened. I spent, 10-20 minutes clicking around in all my different softwares. I did some calculations. I worked out, right, how many customers has this happened to? How much money are we talking about here? When did the payments stop? Like, I needed to fully understand the situation to grasp just what was going on. Now, sometimes when you do this step, you might realize it's not as bad as you think, and that's obviously a positive. I'll be honest, when I did this step, I felt like it was actually worse than I'd kind of feared. I was like, oh, maybe it's just happened for like a couple of people. And then I slowly realized like, oh no, this is like 95% of my future income, 95% of my customers and clients. These are big numbers that we're talking here. But that was still helpful because then I couldn't really spiral. I couldn't make up what ifs. I knew what if. I knew exactly what was happening and what the extent of the issue was. In doing that, I could also then start to understand, the level of crisis that I was dealing with and almost rank it, is this a red, amber, or green? Where are we? And this challenge for me, as I've already shared, like this is a red. Like this needed quick action, quick solutions. This has not been a kind of small thing in my business. Whilst that's not a fun conclusion to draw, clarity is so important in a crisis. When you know things, you can take action, which then moves me on nicely to the third step of how I responded in this crisis, which is understand what you can control. And for that, make a game plan. I'm going to talk in a minute about what to do about the things you can't control. But once you understand the extent of the situation, your brain's naturally then going to start working out, okay, what needs to happen to fix this? And I knew from just knowing how payment systems work, this was not reversible. Like there was not going to be some customer support line I could ring that would just make all of this go backwards. Like this was irreversible. And therefore what I could control was recouping this money. I won't bore you with all of the details, but I basically came up with a game plan of like, right, we're basically going to need every single customer to resubscribe to their payment plan. And then I could obviously work out, right, in order to do that, we need to understand who owes what, how much they owe. We're going to need to set up new products. We're going to need to draft a load of emails. Then I started to think about, right, how long will we give people to resubscribe? What will we do if they don't resubscribe? And at this point, it's probably, 10:30 p.m. at night. It's not a super detailed plan. It's literally just the notes app on my phone. And I'm just getting my brain whirring a bit of like, right, and what can we do? And what might be the plan? The plan has obviously evolved and got a lot better since then. But that initial game plan was so important, A, to help me sleep that night, but B, to help me understand what I could control, the action that was within my wheelhouse that would help me to turn this from a crisis into a distant memory in a few months' time. So that was my game plan. And I'm talking about this now because that game plan is already in motion. I would not be sharing this publicly if we weren't already fairly kind of far on the journey of getting everything resolved. Customers have all been emailed. People have started resubscribing. Do I think that some people won't resubscribe and my business will lose money? Yes. And that's just something that I've had to make my peace with. There's no point overly dwelling on that. But there's a game plan. And when there's a strategy, when there's a plan, my brain is a lot happier. And then whenever I would have those human moments where I wanted to spiral or feel a lot of feelings, I could just bring myself back to that plan and go, it's okay, this is what is going to happen. And kind of depending, I guess, on the extent of what's gone wrong is how urgent that game plan is. This was pretty important. So this has basically been my full focus and my PA's full focus for the last month in order to ensure that we've kind of progressed with this as quickly as possible. But the game plan was about being quick, but also being careful and considered, because a big issue, you don't want to rush fixing that because you want to fix it really intentionally. But that is my third step. What you can control, make a game plan for it. When there's a plan, it's a bit easier to deal with the crisis, which then moves me on to my fourth step, which is what you can't control, try to just let it be. I actually have let it be tattooed on my ribs. It's because that's the translation of Amen. And I grew up in a church setting. So that was the tattoo I decided to get when I was 18 years old. And you know what? Whilst I may not believe all the things that I used to believe, I often think about the meaning of that tattoo and still really resonate with it, of just trying to let it be when it comes to a few things. I'm not going to pretend to be, superhuman. I have absolutely had moments where I have been annoyed and frustrated and angry and stressed, but I'm also just often thinking to myself, like, what is the point in letting myself stay in that space? Like, I could easily tell you how annoying this is, how stressful it is, all of the other things that it's delayed, all of the projects, my rebrand. I've spent over £10,000 on a rebrand that now is really delayed in finishing because this has had to take priority. Like, I could get really annoyed about that. I could get really angry about this payment processor. I could go onto Threads and do some big rants, but like, what's the point? I'm not going to get anywhere with that. I'm just going to to change how I'm feeling and not for the better. That phrase of feel your feelings but don't feed them is something that I've been saying to myself a lot over the past few weeks. And I've not always been this way. It's been really interesting actually to go through this challenge and to think, how would my past self react? Past me would have got very involved in this. Like I would have, spoken to loads of people and, chewed people's ears off about how annoyed I am. And I'd have, felt it all the time. And I would have spent my weekends just dwelling on it. And like, if I'm honest with you, I actually feel quite detached from it. Like there's absolutely moments where I'm like, the logistics of this is really annoying me, or like I am, understandably a bit stressed about money and I'm thinking about what I can do about that. But also like, there's no point just sitting in what I can't control. I'm not really interested in getting angry at that payment processor. Like I've learned my lesson and I'm going to do things differently moving forwards, but like that doesn't gain me anything. I'm way more interested in focusing on what I can control than what I can't control. So that is the fourth thing I'd really recommend. And I think it's a muscle that gets easier the more you do it, but really just trying not to dwell on the things that you can't control and to think, right, well, that has happened. Focusing on what's happened doesn't help. So I'm just going to focus on what I can do next, and almost think of yourself at a crossroad. Like, which path do you want to take? Do you want to get really involved emotionally and dwell on it and let it take over? Or do you want to also still admit that it's really annoying and that there's implications of it and we're not being blind to that, but we're just thinking about action and what we can do instead of dwelling on what's happened? The next thing I would then share is when it comes to those like immediate risks and the things that have kind of quote unquote really gone wrong, you want to work out if there's any immediate actions that you can or want to take in order to help soothe that issue. This is definitely most relevant when it comes to anything that relates to finance, which this problem obviously is. And whilst this will lose me a little bit of money probably in the long term. I mean, it will lose me money as well because of the time that me and my PA have had to spend fixing this. Basically, everything I've paid her for has been to fix this issue over the last month or so. So like it will lose me a bit of money in the long term, but I'd say the biggest issue with this challenge is actually a cash flow one. Like I'm going to get the money. It's going to come in over the next 6 months. It's going to be okay. Like I've not actually lost £26,000 providing lots of people resubscribe, which they are because I have a great community. The biggest issue for me with this was cash flow. I was 2 months behind on direct debits, which in my business was about £12,000. That was the immediate issue. So what I thought about when I realized this had gone wrong and we'd sorted some of those immediate solutions was also like, okay, could I do anything? Do I want to do anything to also help that cash flow? So looking at, okay, are there any offers that I might want to do? Have I got any past clients that might want to continue working with me? Are there any invoices that I forgot to send that now might be a good time to send them? We don't want to take these big dramatic swings and like panic action, but there's often little things that we can do that just help to soothe whatever it is that's most pressing. For me, it was cash flow. And so a week ago, I just started to think, right, is there anything I could do just to help with my cash flow? It's not going to completely fix it, but just to help. And I took a few of those actions and it has helped. Like I know that in a few weeks' time, cash flow is going to be okay. We're going to be fine. And so for me, it was just working out what could I do to bridge the gap? Not big dramatic action, not huge solutions, but maybe just a few little things that might help to soothe this. And that's often something that I do with my clients, right? I'll work out with them, okay, what is the immediate issue? What's the immediate gap that we need to fill? And what can we do? I often think of it like levers to pull. Like what lever can you pull when you need some cash? Or what lever can you pull when you need that other thing, whatever your issue in that crisis might be. And so that is the fifth thing I would share that I have done and has helped. It doesn't fix the issue, but it's almost like treating the symptom, I guess, because whilst you're fixing the big problem, the symptom is still there. And it might be that you can do some things to help with that. But like I said, it's never a panic, big, crazy action. It's maybe just a few small actions that can help to soothe whatever it is that feels most pressing. Rounding off then, the final thing that I will share, which is definitely the reminder and the space that I'm in at the moment as we continue to fix this, is because you have that game plan, because you have a roadmap of what we're going to do and how we're going to fix this, the sixth thing you'll want to do is just to continually remind yourself of that timeline. I can confidently say, having lived through 9 years of business and seen a lot of other people's businesses over the years, nothing lasts forever. Everything passes at some point. And there's something so soothing in that, I think, of remembering like this will pass. The timeline is obviously completely dependent on what your kind of issue or crisis is. For what's going on for me right now, I'm really aware that come maybe like middle of September, this is going to feel good. I say this will feel good. I'm probably still going to be, not the happiest about it, but like it's not going to be as urgent and pressing and stressful as it is right now. Like, the cash flow will be good. Most people will have resubscribed. The immediate admin that we need to do to get people to resubscribe will be in the past. Like, it will have started to pass. It's already started to pass when I share this episode. And I think that's a good thing to remind yourself of. I often think about the question when I'm dealing with a challenge of like, will this matter in 2 years' time? And if I'm honest with you, I'm sure that in 2 years' time, I'll remember this challenge. I'm also sure that the me of 2 years' time isn't going to feel impacted by this. Even the me of 6 months' time, I don't think is going to be very impacted by this. And whilst that doesn't change that current me is impacted by this, and I'm not taking away from that, I think it's just a helpful perspective shift, isn't it? To remember, like, right now this feels so consuming, but if I keep taking the action and I keep moving forwards and I keep controlling what I can control, it is going to pass. It is going to be okay. Everything is okay already, but it's going to be even better the more that I take the action. And reminding myself of that timeline is so helpful. Bit of context to add to that as well is I'm about to take a month off. Every August I leave my business for a month. You could argue that makes this crisis really bad timing, or you could make it that is really good timing, because we're going to get this issue start to be fixed and then I get to take a break. Arguably when I feel that I am most in need of it, just based on how consuming and stressful this has been over the last few weeks. So in recap, the 6 things that I do when I'm in a crisis in my business, the 6 things I have done to get through what I'm going through right now. Let yourself be human, feel what you feel. Understand the situation fully. What's happened? What's the extent of the issue? Figure out what you can control and make a game plan for that. For what you can't control, try to drop it and not dwell on the things that you're not able to change. Work out any immediate action steps that will help soothe the symptoms of what's going on. And finally, remind yourself that there's a timeline and that this will pass. I really hope that you found this episode valuable, whether hearing me talk about a challenge has reminded you that you're not alone, whether maybe you've got something going wrong right now and you can say to yourself, hey, at least I haven't lost 26,000 pounds like Alice. Or maybe some of these reminders have been helpful to you. I would love to hear what you think of this. I'm going to set the boundary that I have no interest in dwelling on how annoyed I am with the payment processor, who the payment processor is, why it's happened. Like, I haven't shared that stuff for a reason because, like I said, I don't think it's helpful or relevant to dwell on. So let me know any of your thoughts aside from those things. If you have had an email from me asking you to resubscribe to something, please do. It's not a scam. This episode maybe gives you a bit of context as to why I've emailed you saying, please resubscribe to your direct debit. Many people, by the way, have been incredible. They've like resubscribed within minutes of getting the email. And those that have replied have just said, like, oh my gosh, this sounds awful. Of course, here's my money. So thank you to those people. And maybe it's relevant as well to share that I do have a few slots for one-to-one right at the end of this year. I do very limited one-to-one support these days, but as I've shared a few times in this episode, a lot of the time with my clients, my role is to take them through these 6 steps, right? And kind of help them to go through this process and deal with the challenges in a way that feels really intentional. And, you know, hopefully makes the challenges feel less stressful. So if you're interested in any one-to-one strategic support, I'll leave the link below to inquire. Having said that out loud, my website is actually under construction, so feel free to pop me an email if you're interested. I'm about to take a month off, but we can have a chat about it in September. But that is it for another episode. Thank you for tuning in. Make sure to subscribe, especially if you're watching this over on YouTube so that you don't miss out on future episodes. And yeah, I hope you've enjoyed hearing about my challenge, and I will be sure to share more probably in September as the challenge is starting to resolve and share some final conclusions with you. Thanks for tuning in.